Welcome to Forward Focus. My name's Tom Burdick. Today's show is Water Conservation Ideas. We've heard a lot in the news last couple of months about the impending drought, and we have all noticed relatively dry winter, and a lot of us have noticed that the soil is not nearly as wet and muddy as it is this time of the year, and that's generally an indicator that we're going to have a little bit drier summer. And there have been a lot of talk historically about water conservation, and we need to think about using our resources more efficiently. So today's show is Water Conservation Ideas. And it's ideas that you can put to work in your own home, in your own yards and backyards to help conserve water. And eventually you'll end up saving money because that water costs you money and you get a bill every month, so it's something to think about. My guest today is Janet Saylor. And Janet Saylor is the Water Conservation Coordinator for the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, which is an awful lot of words, for a very basic idea about saving some water.
Correct.
So give us a little bit about your background, Janet, and what you do for the district.
What I do for the district, Tom, is basically run the water conservation program, which includes a lot of things. I do all of the school outreach, public outreach programs, going into schools, talking to kids about water conservation. We run an irrigation audit program, a landscaping program for our customers. We give out information to people. And right now we're working through our water shortage response plan, which has been a huge time-consuming effort, but very much trying to stay tuned into what's going on.
Is it kind of a what-if plan if we really have a very serious drought? And it's hard to tell in Washington. Sometimes our water pattern changes so dramatically, but as we were talking before the show, there is a trend of dryness. I mean, our aquifers, our underground water levels are dropping.
Depending on where you are, our district operates strictly on groundwater. So we've been measuring our aquifer levels, and we have not had appreciable rainfall since October of 2000.
You're talking about the wells. You're drawing
right,
well
we're
water.
drawing from groundwater. Aquifer is groundwater, underwater. And so we're drawing from our groundwater aquifers, and we've noticed that the levels have not been recuperating because of lack of rainfall. We've also, if you look on a regional basis with surface water, those utilities that provide surface water to their customers have noticed the reservoir levels have been dropping, and also that there has not been as much snowpack this year up in the mountains. While that doesn't affect us in our district directly, it still is something that overall you can kind of see a trend this year. It seems to be definitely lack of rainfall, and that's starting to contribute to a lot of problems.
And lack of snowfall in the wintertime. There are many communities like Tacoma and Seattle, of course, that provide water to a huge number of people.
Exactly.
They rely on those snow melts and reservoirs, and they're definitely concerned.
Yeah, I think that if you look region-wide, and of course Governor Gary Locke issued his statewide drought emergency on March 14th, that gives us some kind of an idea that we are looking statewide at a very serious issue.
So these conservation ideas apply to everyone. Everyone needs to look at those very carefully. And obviously it's costing everybody money too, so the more money they could save off their bill. In some cases, some very inexpensive fixes.
Right. I mean, you can go down to any hardware store and get most of these things very easily. It's not something that's going to be a huge output of money. Another thing, though, that we are trying to do is change people's behavior. We're trying to get people to look at water a little differently. People are used to turning on the tap and having water come out, and they're willing to pay whatever for it.
It's easy to get people upset about the water's cleanliness.
Right.
When we have occasional problems, and people get very upset very quickly, but we don't worry about supply. It's one of those things. Is it my understanding water is one of those things that has a limit? I mean, there's a brick wall there. It
is a finite resource. If you look at the world's water, 97% of the world's water is tied up in the oceans. It's salty. You can look at desalination. It's extremely costly and time-consuming. Another 2% of the world's water is in the polar ice cap, so we can't use it. So that leaves 1% of the world's water for everybody, plants, animals, and people to use. And as you see increased population growth, those are all competing for that resource. We're drinking basically the same water that the dinosaurs drank millions of years ago, because you can't get new water.
And it's just
there is no new water.
Been recycled.
Right, it gets recycled through the water cycle and gets purified.
Well, one of the issues too is that we've done many shows on all the new people coming to this area, and one of the things that attracts a lot of people is there is a very available water. We don't have, historically, have had the problems that Southern Californians have, for instance, where they can't water their lawns, and there's a lot of rationing going on, and a lot of people are driven to this area for that. So here's more people. How do we keep dividing up the same deck of cards?
Well, that is going to be one of the challenges of the future. Another thing that we need to realize is that our water is, we get a lot of, everyone says, oh, it rains all the time here. It's always raining in the winter.
Yes.
And it does rain in the winter, but we do have a summer drought. Now, when we have our summer drought, that's when we have the greatest impact on our water systems, because everybody wants to use water to water lawns, gardens, things like this. And it's when our water levels are at their lowest. And so we have this real problem with the water supply in the peak summer season.
So that peak surging is a problem not only for distribution, but wherever we're getting the water from. I recall years ago reading a statistic that in the months of July and August, Seattle gets less rainfall than Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah. That's
and people
true.
don't realize that here we are, and you know, the ability of lawns to maintain their greenness is as big a problem here as it is in Phoenix. So
exactly.
And yet our pumping capability is the same.
Right.
And yet obviously the water levels drop off in the summertime because of demand.
Right.
You know, a lot of people hear about salmon, and really that's an indicator of the healthiness of our streams. So that's another. I mean, are we taking from the streams and
well, when you're looking at the total water picture, particularly those agencies that are involved with surface water management, those are the ones that are really, I mean, everybody's looking at salmon right now because of the endangered species.
How does our conservation methods help that surface water?
Well, the more water that can be saved, that means there's more water available in streams for fish, you know, whether you're
because the aquifers that feed your wells are also feeding the streams.
Yeah, there has been some evidence that could be a situation that groundwater and surface water are tied together. So what we're trying to do is very carefully look at all of the things that could be affecting streams, not just from a pollution standpoint, but from a water supply standpoint. How much water is in those streams?
Sure. I'm interested too, now you talked about some of the outreach programs.
Right.
And obviously you've got business customers, you've got residential customers, residences. It's easy to go out and talk to the kids in the schools.
Right.
How are you talking to business customers and things they can do?
Well, we do have our commercial irrigation audit program where we're dealing with our commercial customers. 97% of the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District's base is residential customers. We have virtually, I think we have one industrial customer and not very many commercial customers.
But this irrigation program for commercial
what we do is we give people a break on their rates if they have their systems, the irrigation systems, examined by a certified irrigation auditor. And we go through, they make sure all the systems are repaired, and then they do an audit on the system to see how well it's supplying water to the landscape. And once we get all of the paperwork on that program, we will give those customers a reduced rate. So it's kind of an incentive for them to save money. They have to lay out a little bit of cash.
How about with the residential customers? Where are their incentives at? Obviously saving money on their bill.
Right. You know, first of all, if we proceed into this drought situation and as we work through our water shortage response plan, we may end up seeing by the end of the summer some mandatory restrictions. This could be, you know, obviously we're going to try to do everything we can to avoid that. Right now we're in the voluntary conservation stage, and various water supply people are asking for different amounts to conserve. Because of our situation and being strictly on groundwater and not tied into the regional system, we're asking for a 20% reduction. That sounds like, you know, soil. Yeah,
well,
exactly.
we've got some credits coming on. Folks can get a hold of you at that phone number, your extension 204. I want to thank you for joining us today, Janet. We've learned a lot about this show, and we'll do some more on water conservation. And but this is good stuff, good brochures, good information. And I want to thank you for joining us today on Forward Focus. My guest, Janet Saylor.
Okay, thank you.